So I want to make this video for Lab 2.04, which is titled Game Show, but I actually don't want to go over the game show part. The game show part is pretty easy. You're just going to make 10 variables and make an if statement that picks out one of those variables and prints it out. That part's simple. The part that's going to give a lot of people trouble is this triangle app. So I'm going to help you guys out with this. Basically, the way it's supposed to work is that the user is going to type in the length of the three sides of a triangle, and then the first thing it's going to check to see if those three sides can even make a triangle. But then it's even going to go further to test to see if it's a right triangle. It's going to test to see if it's an equilateral triangle. It's going to test to see if it's an isosceles triangle. So we're going to have a lot of if statements in here. So I just wanted to go over them really quickly with them because it's not that difficult. It's just got a lot of pieces to it. So really quick, let's throw up a shebang. And I'm going to make this text a little bit bigger here. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to grab the input from the users to figure out the length of the three sides of a triangle. So we could do side 1 equals input. What is the length of side 1? And we're just going to do this for all three sides. So let's just copy and paste this and change it to side 2, side 3, and update the text accordingly. So this will grab the length of each side from the user so they can type in the triangle. And I might just put print this app will tell you what type of triangle you have. Input the length of each side. Something like that. So they know that this app is going to tell them what kind of triangle they have. All right, so once we have the inputs from the three users, we're just going to use some really simple conditional statements to test to see if it's a real triangle. And the first one is a doozy because in order to have three sides make a triangle, all three of these statements need to be true. So side 1 plus side 2 must be greater than side 3. Side 2 plus side 3 must be greater than side 1. And side 1 plus side 3 must be greater than side 2. All three of those statements need to be true to make a triangle. So this is just going to be an if-else statement. But the if that we test for is going to be 3 conditions long. So we're going to use some and statements to make sure that every condition is met. So the first statement is going to be this, side 1 plus side 2, and that needs to be greater than side 3. Whoops, no spaces there. And there we go. And one thing that I might want to do too is just to make sure that this addition happens before the comparison. This should check out. This should work no problem. Python should be able to read this code easily, but I am always trying to be careful and just make sure that it does the addition of side 1 and side 2 before it compares it to side 3. I don't think those parentheses are absolutely necessary. I think it would run, but I'm just going to put them anyway just to make sure. So that's my first condition, but I have 2 more conditions that need to come out true. So remember, I'm going to use and statements to make sure that all those conditions happen. I'm actually going to make this text a little bit smaller so I can try to squeeze it in. So my next condition is that side 2 plus side 3 is greater than side 1. And again, I'm just going to make sure it does the addition before it does the comparison. Like I said, I don't think that should be a problem, but just making sure. And then let's go ahead and throw in our last statement here. The last condition that needs to be met is that side 1 plus side 3 is greater than side 2. And one more time with the parentheses. So that should be my if statement. So if all 3 of those things are true, and again, I'm testing to make sure all 3 of them happen with and statements, for AND statements to come back true, every one of these needs to be true for that. And we probably just need to close this up with one more parentheses. It should check out, hopefully. And then remember, we end our if statements with a colon. And then from there, we can put code underneath our if statement. So if all this code checks out, we'll print those sides make a triangle. Let me figure out which type. And then what we can also do is, remember, we can use our else statements. So we could write an else. And then under that one, we can put the code, what happens when this condition is not met. So if that condition is not met, we could say something along the lines of, sorry, those sides do not make a triangle. So if they put in some numbers, triangle, like if they put in 2, 2, and 100, that would not make a triangle. Two of those sides are way too short for it to connect. So in that case, we could write, sorry, those sides don't make a triangle. But if they put in sides that do, we could say it makes a triangle. Now this is where it gets a little tricky, because if those conditions are met, we want to then tell them what type of triangle it is. So if the conditions are met, we are going to be writing a little more code under this if statement here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll print those sides make a triangle, and then we can test for the next thing, which is if they make a right triangle. And in order to make a right triangle, we have side 1 squared plus side 2 squared equals side 3. So if that checks out, we can tell them it makes a right triangle. So in that case, we can write another if statement, and our condition is this. If, and then we can write side 1 squared plus side 2 squared equals, and to test for equality, we need 2 equal signs, side 3 squared. So if that statement comes back true, we could then print out it's a right triangle. Okay, so then we have our test to see if it's a right triangle. And you can notice that we put an if statement underneath an if statement. That's perfectly okay. We're going to test to see if it's a triangle. If it is a triangle, then we are going to test if it's a right triangle. So we can definitely have those two if statements underneath each other. And then this is a little tricky here. So the next thing we want to do is we want to test to see if it's an equilateral triangle. And it's important that we're not going to put this in an else statement, because you could have a right triangle that's also an isosceles triangle. So we are going to put this second if statement, this kind of stands alone, test to see if it's a right triangle, and then we'll test to see if it's equilateral, isosceles, or scalene. So we will write that code here. So how do we test to see if something is an equilateral triangle? That one's fairly easy. An equilateral triangle just means that all 3 sides are equal. So we'll just do that right here. We could test if side 1 is equal to side 2. Whoops, double equal signs there. Right? What we can also do is we can write an AND statement, and side 2 is equal to side 3. And you can see this will actually test to see if all 3 sides are equal. We don't need a third statement. If side 1 is equal to side 2 and side 2 is equal to side 3, that also means that side 1 is equal to side 3. So that will test that there. So if that condition is met, we can print it's an equilateral triangle. And so there's our condition to test to see if it's an equilateral triangle. If it's not an equilateral triangle, it could potentially be an isosceles triangle, which means just one of the 2 sides are equal. So for this, we can start to use our elif statement, because if it's not an equilateral triangle, then we want to check to see if it is an isosceles. So our condition here is that just two sets of sides are equal. So in this case, we could have side 1 is equal to side 2, or we could have side 2 equal to side 3, or last combination is side 1 is equal to side 3. So that would test if any of the two sides are equal. And we can put a colon underneath that, and then if that condition is met, we will print it's an isosceles triangle. And then our last condition is just the else. So if it's not an equilateral and it's not an isosceles, but it is a triangle, all that leaves for us is that it's a scalene triangle, which means no two sides are the same length. Triangle. There we go. And so we're testing for each triangle. So let's go ahead and give this a test. Let's see if I made any errors, which is probably very likely. Oh, yes. All right, something is missing. Probably that was it. Just one too many parentheses. So let's just give this a try. Let's make an equilateral triangle. 3, 3, and 3. And something else doesn't check out. Ooh, I see it right away. I made a big mistake here. So if we are going to try to do some math on our numbers here, we need to make sure they're numbers. And if you remember correctly, input always returns a string. So in order to do math on this, we need to convert those to integers. So big mistake there, but easy fix. We're just going to wrap our inputs in int functions so we can transform those string inputs into integer inputs that we can do math on. So now we could go ahead and run this. Let's see, there we go. So those sides make a triangle. It's an equilateral triangle. Perfect. We could try different sides, 3, 4, 5. And that makes a right scalene triangle. So perfect. So this is our program. Works perfectly. No problems. That is your triangle program.